to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and quote unquote, I hope you had a nice Christmas. Since most of you listening to this program will be hearing it after Christmas. Some of you are watching on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok right now, and the phone lines are open. You can call us using the number there at the bottom of your screen from now till 5 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday, the 22nd of December, if that's when you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok. But everybody else, you'll have to wait until Wednesday. That is when we will be live on the radio again, live in the studio again to answer your questions. So give us a call then. And answering your questions today for the next hour, we've got Brian Broderson, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. Also, Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. And he's also the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. And on Skype, we've got Phil Metzger from Calvary San Diego. What's going on, guys?
Hi, guys.
Hey.
What's up, dudes?
Good to see you, Phil. I've seen Bobby already, so I haven't seen you in a long time, though. So nice to see you're still alive and well on planet Earth.
Yeah, it looks like you had a good trip where you were. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, had a really fantastic time. Was great. Yep.
Yay. All right, so here we go with some questions from people that are listening on this Thursday or watching online on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok. We're going to begin with Joy calling us from Michigan. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Joy.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
So my question has to do with, I have a daughter who went through a divorce about 2.5 years ago. And it was, very painful, they were both going to church, Christ followers, and he just decided he wanted out of the marriage and had somebody else. And so my daughter, went through a lot of pain, a lot of, it's been very hard. But she has met somebody, and they've been talking and dating for about a year now. And I've had my suspicions, but it was just recently confirmed that they're living together. And there are children involved. She's got 2 children. And I know that she knows better. I know that she knows I would disapprove, that I would not approve of it. But I don't know, should I confront her, or is this like something that I should let her just, I don't know. Because our pastor has said many times from the pulpit, do not give your adult children advice unless they ask for it. So that's kind of where I am.
All right, Phil, what do you tell Joy?
Well, Joy, I'm smiling on the video just because I like your adult pastor's advice, or your pastor's advice to adults. Yeah, it is hard, man. It's hard to give advice to children who are adults. We move away from, being the parent in that sense, that strict sense of don't do this or do this, and we become more coaches, encouraging and trying to inspire and trying to direct. And I think, whether you decide to speak to your daughter or not, I'm going to trust the Lord to lead you on that. Obviously she's gone through quite a bit of hurt. To be clear, if we just want to let me start with just kind of a clarity of, yes, your concerns are valid. There's a bigger picture involved in it, which is why I think you're calling. It's not just the technicality of should she be living with a guy she's not married to, but she's gone through a lot of hurt. There's kids involved. There's a lot more that happens rather than just sex outside of marriage. And so you pray about whether the Lord wants you to speak to her or not. My guess is if she's been in the things of the Lord, then she already knows. And she's already wrestling through that. We could definitely encourage you to do this. Just be praying for her, but not just that she would not be in this relationship, but that the Lord would move in her heart, and that, she would see her need for the Lord is probably the biggest issue, more than whether or not she's living with this person is that she would have a real sense of, gosh, I want for me and for these kids, I want to have a relationship with Christ. And so pray for that. And whether or not you should speak out, let the Lord lead you on that. But I do agree with the pastor that said, we do need to be careful what kind of advice we're giving to our adult children. We need to let them come to us. We want to keep relationship with them.
Joy, is your daughter and her boyfriend, do they attend church?
Yeah, they do. Not our church. They're going to another church in their town, but yes, they do attend church. Mm-hmm.
Brian, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think everything Phil said, of course, is right. And I am the parent of adult children, and I know that there's only so much you can actually say to your adult children. I guess I would think maybe, Joy, it's a situation where you might, excuse me, you might just ask the question, like, it says here that they met at church and now they're living together. So maybe just out of curiosity, how did that happen? How does that square with meeting at church? Shouldn't lead to living together outside of marriage.
Right.
So, and the other thing I think too is, so your daughter's gone through a divorce. Are they getting married? Are they engaged? Or
yeah,
okay,
are engaged.
Okay, yeah. So now she's going to enter into a new relationship. I don't know. You want to get started on the right foot, not the wrong foot. I mean, it was sin in some way, shape, or form that ruined the first marriage,
right.
And sin will ruin any marriage, or potentially at least make it, difficult or miserable. So, this is sinful. We don't like to sometimes say that, but the reality is that that's what this is. It's doing
right.
things contrary to what God has said. So I don't know. I just think maybe just a conversation like, hey, how are you thinking about this going into a marriage, but yet obviously not really at this point doing it God's way?
Yeah, I've really struggled with this because like I said before, our pastor has said not to do that. But then again, I'm also she's a sister in Christ.
Yes.
And we are supposed to go to, another believer and speak the truth in love.
Yep.
So that's where I'm struggling.
Yeah. And I think that's a good place to sort of, function from, like, hey, I'm not really talking to you as your mother right now. I just want to ask you this as a Christian. Mm-hmm. Why, or why have you chosen this? And you might not get a satisfactory answer, but
right,
who knows?
When she first started dating him, I said, well, my question is he? What's his spiritual health? I mean, is he a strong Christian? Because we had just gone through who we thought was a strong Christian, and then her ex-husband did what he did, and so that was my concern was, and she was like, well, he's way beyond where her ex was, so that
and you get that. I mean, sometimes sad to say, the person who's not, quote unquote, the strong Christian ends up being the person with better character than the so-called strong Christian does. And that very well could be the attraction. He's nice, he's loving, he's kind, he's, these things. Okay. That's hard stuff, really. So, and, there's forgiveness. The Lord is gracious, and,
Yeah, I believe that too, and I believe He sees the whole picture with what she's been through.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I also think about what is this doing to her daughters?
Yeah.
What are they learning?
How old are they?
7 and 4.
Yep. Well, at this stage, the 7-year-old might obviously have a little more understanding of what's going on. The 4-year-old maybe not as much, but if they're going to be married soon, then that'll be behind them. So,
Joy, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Give us a call if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok on Thursday. The number's right there on the bottom of your screen. We're here till 5 p.m. Pacific time. Let's talk to Sean in California. How can we help you, Sean?
Hi, pastors. Can you hear me? Can you guys
yes,
hear me?
yeah, the pastors can hear you loud and clear. Brian Perez is having a bit of a hard time, but
yes. I try not to answer when somebody says, pastors, can you hear me? Because I'm like, well, I'm not a pastor, so I'm technically not supposed to answer. But
yeah, and let me just put this out for our audience. 2023 is just around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
If throughout 2023, if people could just remember that asking the question, "Can you hear me?" really kind of just unsettles our host, then we could have a much better year.
Yes.
Together.
I will have less stress in my life. And so make it your New Year's resolution.
That's it. It's
when you
great
call into Pastor's Perspective, don't ask, can you hear me? Can you guys do that for me? Thank you.
I'm going to start every time you ask how I'm doing. I'm going to say, can you hear me, Brian? Can
Phil.
you hear me?
Phil. I thought you loved me, Phil.
I do. I won't do it, but it's a great joke.
You love stressing me out. That's what you love. No, I'm joking. All right, Sean, let's hear your question.
It's the car Bluetooth's fault. That's why I asked.
Oh, yes. I hear you.
Okay, so my question is, I'm looking through Exodus 12 and trying to correlate that to the Gospels of how Jesus fulfilled the Passover lamb. And I come to the part where the Passover lamb was killed at twilight, and then referencing the Gospels, except for John, says potentially, or not potentially, says at 9 or the 9th hour. So all the commentary that I read says that's about 3 o'clock. So was that twilight in the ancient days? I still don't. Let's even say daylight savings was a factor. That would be 4 o'clock. Can you help me understand that?
Yeah, there doesn't have to be any corresponding thing with Jesus and each and every little detail of the Passover.
Okay.
The Passover, just in the general sense, was obviously pointing to Christ. But again, like say the what we call the Last Supper, where Jesus breaks the bread and passes around the cup. These things were not part of the original Passover, but they came into the tradition before the time of Jesus, and so they were brought into into the meal, but then made part of a picture of what the Lord was actually doing. So, yeah, I think we just don't need to worry about it not fulfilling every little detail, because Jesus is the Passover lamb that typifies him. But remember, it was the bread that he broke and said, "This is my body." In the Passover, the lamb is what you ate. And they would have eaten the lamb, but Jesus didn't say when they were eating the lamb, "This is my body." He said the bread. So,
Bobby, what would you add?
The interesting thought about the word twilight in Exodus 12:6 is it's a contested word, but it can mean between two evenings. And so there has been some discussion around that, but typically what would take place is on the day that Passover took place, this would be offered up around, that 3 o'clock hour. So between like 3 and 5 o'clock would be the time frame, because it's not like there's just going to be, one sacrifice always that's taken place. So it would allow them to prepare the sacrifice, and they would have a season, in the afternoon. And so at 3 o'clock, if you think that's kind of when the sun starts going down to about 5, that would give a couple hours for the slaying and the preparing for all the different lambs that would be slain, so to speak. So that's one way. If you see it between 2 evenings, then you won't have to look at it technically as twilight. But it has actually an interesting history of debate, with Samaritans and different people coming up with different times to try to deal with this. But the time frame seems to be in that 3 to 5 range.
But do you think there's any reason why we have to find a correlation in the New Testament to twilight?
No, I mean, I really don't. I think what you said fits for me just fine. But I do think it can be extra beautiful when you think of the 9th hour being at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then thinking that even amongst those that are Jewish, that they would still kind of land in that 9th hour, or to 11th hour time frame, because the word's contested. So I would say let's just say it was twilight, and then Jesus, dies at 3. Would that undo everything? Well, I would say no. I'd say that's just the time that he gave himself up. But I think it's pretty cool when you think about that word twilight's been disputed to mean between 2 evenings, and then the zeroing in time frame being between that 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock time, considering he gave himself up at 3. That's just, a little bit of whipped cream on top of the pie for us, maybe.
Right.
Sean, what do you think?
I think that's...
Whoa, what happened to your phone? Oh my goodness, that Bluetooth.
Really
what is wrong with that?
Like Darth Vader.
Yes, man. Wow.
See why he asked, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. Man, that was borderline creepy. Sean, thanks for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective. Now we're going to go to Jose. Thanks for calling us today from California, Jose.
Hey guys.
Wait a minute, what is going on here? Why did the phone sound like this? That is like really bizarre. It's like Darth Vader hour. I don't get this. It must be our phone lines, because I don't think everybody, it's a practical joke everybody's playing on us. I don't know. Well, Jose, get to your question quick, because I don't know how long this is going to hold. Go ahead.
Yeah, how do you know if you and your partner are unequally yoked?
That is so strange. What is going on?
Well, you know it if one of the two of you are not. No. That's what is crazy is that really is Darth Vader's voice. That is. Right? That's not just something that sounds like Darth Vader.
Right. It's not like one of those Darth Vader voice changers.
Darth Vader has taken over
the voice, so nobody knows who it is.
Right. Well, sometimes people do want to call in anonymously, and they want to change their name, and I guess they can change their voice too. But wow, that was really bizarre. We'll have to look into that.
Okay, Bobby,
Jose's
what about the unequally yoked thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that sometimes people are bringing this up because they're wanting to understand unequally yoked as it relates to being married, and then the way we would talk about unequally yoked, we use that term and we apply it in a marriage context. But what do we mean by that? You just want to find somebody that's spiritually aligned with you, right? Like, it doesn't mean you have to see eye to eye on every single viewpoint. I'm suspecting that he was asking about marriage, and I would have liked to have followed up, but I don't know if he wanted to know more about the context. Let me speak to marriage, and then you guys can jump in and talk about what's actually going on in the context there. But as it relates to marriage, when Heather and I were dating, we both believed in the Lord. We were kind of at the same place. But then I found myself feeling pressure because I was growing in my knowledge through Bible college, and I was feeling like I had to catch her up on everything that I was learning so that we could stay equally yoked. And then I realized, well, this is absurd, right? Like we both love Jesus, but so it's okay if we don't have the same theological positions on everything. That's just part of learning to accept each other and have maturity in our marital relationship. So sometimes if somebody's dating a non-believer, well, then that's obviously you're not yoked in the sense of being aligned biblically in your belief. But then there's also, you can both be professing Christians, but one could be so much further ahead, and then that could be deleterious to the relationship. And so I would say keeping that mindful. But then there's also zeroing in on the initial context. And you want to take that one, Brian or Phil?
Well, I think, we use unequally yoked, and most often we use it to talk about the marital relationship.
Yeah.
But the text where you find the term has nothing to do with the marital relationship.
Right.
Paul is there warning the believers in Corinth about closely associating with false people who teach the wrong thing. So that's the unequal yoke there. Does it apply in principle further out? I do think it does. But just to be, very specific, the text itself does not say that. Paul does say to the Corinthians in the earlier letter about those, who are single and on the way to being married or maybe remarried. In the specific case is that they were to do that only in the Lord. So he does seem to say there that, Christians should marry another Christian.
Yeah, that's such a good word. And you think about like false teaching. This is where we have to remember. I mean, Christianity is a creedal faith, and it always has been a creedal faith. And that's one of my problems with like an ultra ecumenicalism. Like I think that we should work together. We should find ways to work together. But then there comes a dangerous point, right? Like within Freemasonry, for example. And now all of a sudden, you're not equally yoked in that sense, in that moment when you're coming together and making these oaths, so to speak, in a lodge. Yeah. And so there's caution to be had there. The Bible has so much to say about false teaching. Every book of the New Testament, in one place or another, there is a warning against false teaching. And so we have to be careful that if it all just bleeds together, then what was the purpose of Jesus dying on a cross and rising from the dead? Mm-hmm. So we need to realize that we're to be yoked to Jesus in our belief.
Yeah.
Jose, thank you for calling us with your questions today on Pastor's Perspective. Dare I go back to the phones? I don't know. Let's see. Peter in California, welcome to the program. How can we help you?
Hi, pastors. Merry Christmas.
That sounds so weird, especially when you say Merry Christmas. But yeah, I don't know if you can hear it there, Peter, but you'll hear it on the radio on Monday. All of our callers today sound like Darth Vader. I don't know why.
Yeah, I heard it on the last caller.
Okay, yeah.
You sound like a nice version of Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Yes.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah,
Darth Vader saying, praise the Lord. Wait, say that again.
Praise the Lord.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Darth Vader just got saved.
Sounds like you're gargling.
Yeah. So what's up, Peter?
So our family has been enjoying watching The Chosen over the last year or so, and I'm not sure if you guys have seen that program. But recently, someone in our Bible study small group shared with me that they actually aren't comfortable watching it because they felt like it might be wrong. And so my question is, do you guys think it's wrong or a sin for us to watch programs or movies that depict the life of Jesus? And I know it may have to do with how well they're done. But it kind of caused me to take pause and, wonder, hey, is this a sin? Is this a violation of the second commandment?
All right. So got to put you back on hold because I can only take so much of Darth Vader's voice. But thank you for your question, Peter. So we've had this question in the past, and I know what answer you guys gave in the past. Let's see if anybody has changed their answer. Pastor Brian, have you yet watched The Chosen?
I have not.
Bobby, have you yet watched The Chosen?
I've seen a couple clips, and I saw at the movie theater the debut of the new season.
Yeah. Oh, so you did watch that.
Let me just say this. Yeah, so I'll say this. I don't think it's wrong to watch it. I mean, because if you can't watch that, then you shouldn't be watching anything, right? So we can't watch other things and then, boycott that. I do think we need to be familiar with our Bible, because if you're not, you're going to be subject to confusion. So, for example, James, I think he's called Tiny James. And there's this scene where James is talking to Jesus, and he wants to be healed. And James says, how can I go about healing others in the condition that I'm in? And I think that they depicted him with like cerebral palsy. Now, obviously, there's no history that James had cerebral palsy. So Jesus then says to him, my power is going to basically be made great in weakness, because you're going to be healing, but you're going to show that, my grace is sufficient, so to speak. Well, it was a very touching, narrative. My problem with it is it's totally unbiblical. Now, should you not watch it? I don't think so. But for me, my discerner was just on while I was watching it. And it's kind of like Christmas time. There's so much confusion that people have about Christmas because they watch all kinds of Christmas stories about Jesus, but they don't read their Bible. And so they're totally confused. And that's my fears, that people will take The Chosen as their Bible devotion instead of getting into the Bible. So I would say, as long as you're reading your Bible, no problem. And I don't even have a problem with them doing that in The Chosen, to be honest with you, because anytime you're going to write a biography on the life of Jesus, so to speak, you might have some creative license. Like, imagine this, or I wonder if it was like this. Now, giving James cerebral palsy and having that enacted, it was touching. The problem is it's just not true. So I would have much rather had just the truth of the Gospels be depicted. So I get it. It moves emotions. I think it's touching. It leverages creative imagination. But unfortunately, many people are just going to watch The Chosen, and then we're going to have to scrub away the untruths that come there. So for me, I'd rather just stick with the Bible, but I have no problem with people reading it or watching it.
Phil Metzger?
Bobby sounds like the chosen Scrooge right there. Just kidding, Bobby. That was great. I think I totally agree with him. And I say I think only because for me, I agree with you. That part about the way they expressed, James was total creative license. And yet, like you said, I agree. It was very touching. And I completely agree.
If you
don't have biblical literacy, then you're in trouble, period. Whatever you watch, you're in trouble. You could watch The Shack. You can watch, what were all those Dan Brown book video movies with
Da Vinci Code?
Yeah, Da Vinci Code.
I read the Bible. And so when I read The Shack, I was like, oh, cool book.
That's right.
I read the Bible, so I watched Dan Brown, and I'm like, oh, for heresy, that was really fun to watch. Like, if, just as a pure heretical story, apocryphal. And so Bobby is 100% correct. If you don't read the Bible, it's not going to work. But if you read the Bible, you can enjoy some of the creative expressions that they share.
Darth Peter, thank you for your phone call today. Yes, absolutely. We will come back, talk about The Chosen here on Pastor's Perspective. Give us a call if you want to sound like Darth Vader. We'd love to hear from you. welcome back to Pastor's Perspective. My name is Brian Perez, and if you're listening on the radio on Monday, December 26th, hope you had yourself a merry little Christmas. We are not live on the radio today, but we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok on Thursday afternoon, recording this episode of the program, December 22nd. So if you're watching us on one of the aforementioned platforms, you can give us a call. The number is right there on the bottom of your screen. And also give us a call if you want to sound like Darth Vader. Something's going on with our phone lines, and all of our callers sound like Darth Vader today. We don't know why, but we think we fixed it. We don't know. In fact, give us a call so we can test the phone line. How's that? But anyway, right before the break, Brian Broderson, Bobby Conway, and Phil Metzger were discussing The Chosen, because we had a call from Darth Peter, who had a question about, is it okay for Christians to watch TV shows like The Chosen? And so where were we before the music started?
Phil was...
I just wanted to mention something about... Oh, Phil, were you finished? I thought he was, but maybe he wasn't.
Oh, no, yeah, go ahead and share. Yeah, please.
Yeah. No, I'd asked you, Brian, to come back to this. So a couple things. Like, for example, when I'm teaching it, as I'm sure you guys do the same thing, we can exercise some creative license, but there's different ways to perform art, so to speak. I think that when we're teaching, we have a moral obligation to be able to say something like, I can imagine Jesus doing something like this. So we say that. Well, when you're doing film, that would be silly for, the actor to say, this is perhaps what went down. So when it comes to film, there's a different level of license that you can take. So again, the reason I would have no problem, my goodness, it's probably the best thing that you can watch on TV right now would be The Chosen. Okay. So I would want to say that for sure. But just know that there's license that are being taken. In the same way that C.S. Lewis in doing The Great Divorce, or Narnia, or Dante's Inferno, or Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. That's a very fair and acceptable thing to do because their goal wasn't to be a direct commentary. And so that's what they're doing. All I'm expressing in this is there's a danger to all of it. If we don't know our Bible, there's a danger to reading The Great Divorce that you end up an inclusivist. There's a danger in reading any of these books that take the creative license to reading Dante's Inferno, to thinking that that's what hell's going to be like. In fact, what was going on in Dante's time, interestingly enough, is there was a lot of mocking for example, there was a mockery of Satan, of depicting him with a pitchfork, so to speak. And what people have done is they've literalized him in that. And instead of recognizing that this was a medieval way of mocking Satan, now we've adopted it because we didn't know the Bible. We didn't understand the mockery. And now people mock us thinking that we actually believe in that vision. So all I would say is, I think in the local church, we would service our people well in discipleship if we would help them to understand what kind of license can people take artistically through the medium of preaching. Well, you might say things like, I can imagine Jesus saying, when it comes to writing a novel, you can have a lot more license. I think something like The Shack goes off the theology. It abuses some theological boundaries by falling into the ancient heresy of Patripassianism, amongst other heresies, which was just replete through the read. So I think just because you're writing a fiction, I think we still need to be faithful to the theology of the scriptures. And this is where Lewis gets himself in trouble a little bit with inclusivism, right? So all that to say, this is a debated issue, but I'm a person, I've read The Great Divorce, I've read Narnia, I've read Pilgrim's Progress, I've read Dante's Inferno, and I've watched a few clips of The Chosen, and I don't have any problem with it, but I do think we need to keep our discerner on.
Brian?
I just can't wait to 2023 to talk more about patripassionism. Yeah, that's going to be a favorite topic in the year to come.
Yeah, when this is the doctrine where you got the Father dying on the cross and not the Son, and obviously that becomes problematic.
Slightly, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have nothing to say because I already said I haven't watched a single episode.
Let's, you and I, make a New Year's resolution to watch at least one episode of The Chosen.
Well,
because I haven't watched it.
I did see a little clip on, somewhere on social media. And I'm not watching it for any reason like I have any problem with it. I don't really ever watch those kinds of movies, and this is just another one of those kinds of movies. So it falls into the category of the kinds of movies Brian doesn't watch.
That's the only reason.
Like Top Gun.
Like Top Gun, a great example. But guess what? I watched Maverick.
You watched it?
I was on a plane, and there it was, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to go back and watch the original, but I heard this a bit of a standalone, so I'll check it out. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely, it was such a feel-good.
Wasn't it great?
Feel-good film, yeah. Oh, yeah. You just walked away going, wow, that was awesome.
Phil Metzger.
So do you want to watch the first one now?
No, I do not want to watch the first one. I'm not going back. I am not going back to the 90s and reliving that.
Phil Metzger, what do you think of Top Gun?
You did go back to the 90s. You watched Maverick.
Wait, that wasn't the 90s.
No. It's recent, but it was kind of a throwback. A lot of it was a throwback to the original.
Oh, it's connected. Yeah, sure. Right.
Yeah, it's connected. Yeah, I was just going to say, if Brian is, if Maverick was the movie he wasn't going to watch, just like Chosen isn't what he's going to watch, 2023 is bringing us some exciting changes, friends. It's bringing us some exciting changes.
No, you know what? Here's what I heard. I heard recently that Chosen was on Netflix. So I went to Netflix thinking, oh, I heard it's on here. Maybe I'll watch a few episodes. And then I couldn't find it. And then I was like, wait, where is it? So anyway, maybe I just need to scroll a little further on Netflix.
And I think
I will watch an episode. And I heard there's some really epic episodes. I've heard there's some very powerful stuff.
There are. And again, if you're just like, if it's supplemental, that's the whole point that Bobby was making and that I would also want to make. It's just, it's like you're reading your Bible and you're like, oh, wow, I could imagine something like that. Like we would do, how many of us have taught a Bible study where the only thing people walked away with was the joke we told that had nothing to do with the message? This is what happens when you use any creative license. That's the danger. C.S. Lewis, he's a lion. He's not safe or whatever. That gets thrown into so many doggone things. It makes no sense. When they talk about God that way, it's so easy to do that. But with that said, they did a very, I'm not trying to be the proponent of the show. It's a show. Keep that in mind. It is a show. But if you're looking for something that kind of sparks creativity in the way you understood the life of Jesus,
and wholesome,
wholesome. It's a great way to go.
But let's make this clear, because this is the specific question that we're actually answering here. Is this a violation of the second commandment? Because here is an image of Jesus. It's a person, acting. And the answer to that question is absolutely not. This is not. We had the question the other day. Yeah. The same thing comes up, about having, a graven image, what if you have a picture of Jesus in your house or something? Are you in violation of the second commandment? And I pointed out that the second commandment prohibits bowing down and worshiping images. It doesn't prohibit having an image. It prohibits making them for the purpose of worship.
Yeah, one of the things, and that's such a great statement, people probably can tell just even listening to me, I've been really cutting my teeth on Kierkegaard lately. I think I've read 4 or 5 biographies on his life in the last month, and
I kind of sense that. I just was feeling like when I listened to you, like Bobby must be reading Kierkegaard, just was coming through.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I like to pick a philosopher, and Kierkegaard is just this creative type, but he would write under pseudonyms like, Anticlimacus, Johannes Climacus, Johannes Silentio. And what was interesting about his style is he said, please don't quote me directly as stating that. So he would write books, and it was like his opportunity. Like if you wanted to be an old earther, Brian, then you could come out with a book by a pseudonym and you could make a case for old earth, right? But you don't want anybody thinking that's your view. And so he would do all of this with his views. And then later he would kind of come out with, his views. But that was his creative and artistic approach by creating these different characters where he had the creative license to develop, some viewpoints. And so what ends up happening, though, if people aren't aware of that, they don't take him at his word, and they'll say Kierkegaard said, and it was actually maybe like Anticlimacus that said that. And so it's like, hey, he didn't want to be associated with that. He had a project that he was very intentional about doing. And so what I like about him is he's really like putting a puzzle together. He's known as the father of existentialism. He was a tortured soul. He struggled with a lot of anxiety and guilt in his life. He believed he would die young. He did die young at the age of 42. And so Kierkegaard's this individual, though, who really has an artistic way of bringing philosophy to bear. But today's philosophy, you know what I think? It's really boring and dry. It's just complete, it's just argument after argument after argument. And I was thinking, boy, we need some more Kierkegaard types that are apologists and philosophers that can go into the mediums of book writing and film and music and tell a story using that license. And as long as we read our Bible, that can be such a great resource to us.
Yep, I agree.
Good stuff.
Completely agree. It said it was said about the Russian people that their novelists are their philosophers, and that is how they communicate their philosophy is through story. Yeah,
Tolstoy.
Phil, you're awfully...
Dostoevsky was incredible.
Yeah.
Brothers Karamazov. I mean, just phenomenal. Yeah, you're getting into Anna Karenina. I mean, Crime and Punishment. I mean, this is such good writing for people.
Now, Phil, you seem unduly quiet today.
Really?
You do a little bit, yeah. Do you?
Wow.
Do you want to chime in on any of this? We talked earlier about Bobby. He just finished his a recent book that's not going to actually appear on the shelf until 2024. You wrote a great book some years ago. I really loved that book on the story of grace, which was basically a kind of a history of the ministry that we were involved with in Eastern Europe. You got anything else in your, got anything coming soon?
He's writing an episode of The Chosen.
I know you're...
Yeah. I'm a new writer. That's why I'm so passionate about this.
Now, are you still doing your doctoral degree, or have you paused that, or what's going on?
I'm in the dissertation, or I'm right at the kind of dissertation phase. So I'm writing what I'm calling a framework of mission within Calvary Chapel. And so I've gone back to the beginning of the movement, and I'm tracing an archival study of what does it look like to be on mission within our movement, moving into 2022, 2023, and so on. I'm hoping it'll be a great, resource for churches and for missionaries. That's kind of my focus. That's my whole life right now is kind of doing that. No, I'm not. I am just enjoying the conversation. I was enjoying Kierkegaard. I was learning stuff. Kierkegaard. We're talking about Kierkegaard on Passover.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what, if you guys want a good read that I'm reading right now, just to pass something on, and Brian, maybe you could give this to Cheryl. I'm about to finish this book up. It's by Benjamin Lipscomb, but it's called The Women Are Up to Something. And interestingly enough, the subtitle is How Elizabeth Anscombe, Philippa Foot, Mary Migley, and Iris Murdoch revolutionized ethics. Now, these aren't all Christians, but they were lifelong friends. They studied at Oxford. And during World War II, when the men went away to war, women got this opportunity to come to Oxford and really let their voices be heard. And the interesting thing was how much heart they would bring to ethics. And so you would have people like an atheist like Philippa Foot, who really would still say there's got to be objective right and wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So she would see all these ethical arguments that these philosophers were making that wasn't even grounded in objectivity. And so basically these four women were lifelong friends and really transformed Oxford and its ethics department. And Elizabeth Anscombe, the modern philosophy, her article on modern philosophy is the most cited article in the literature of philosophy of religion over any article ever published. She debated C.S. Lewis and literally annihilated him. And Lewis conceded that he lost the debate, but she was a lifelong Catholic. But I only bring that up because, there's no questions on the board. And I know that Cheryl loves studying women in history, but maybe Elizabeth Anscombe, I think that you guys would just appreciate the history of that story of these four friends.
Yeah, let me just say something about the Elizabeth Anscombe C.S. Lewis debate, because I think you overstated the case. She did not annihilate him. She actually educated him, and he admitted later that she's a Christian, so she's not arguing, because when you talk about somebody debating Lewis, oftentimes people misinterpret this to mean that, it was like an atheist debating him and the atheist won. She was a Christian. She just argued against Lewis that she felt one of his particular points was weak, and she unraveled his point, and he agreed with her, and he came back then actually having adjusted his view based upon her influence. And the reason I say that is because somebody like A.N. Wilson, who wrote a biography on Lewis, says that Lewis stopped doing apologetics because he was so discouraged by his debate with Elizabeth Anscombe that he then decided to write children's books. That's the way A.N. Wilson puts it. And that is not even remotely historical. So anyway, I just thought I'd set the record straight because, of course, I just came from Oxford, so I know all this Oxford stuff right now. I will forget this.
But interestingly enough, in fairness to Lewis, that was Lewis' self-assessment because he wanted to invite Anscombe back, and he said, "Well, she, might as well be my successor." She didn't take it, but he made the annihilation term was certainly hyperbole, but he did concede that he lost the debate.
He did.
But you're exactly right. You got to love that Lewis was humble enough to, recognize. I mean, Lewis taught philosophy for a year before he taught literature. And he was much more gifted in literature than he was a pure philosopher. Anscombe was that. And he kudos to him for that.
I love that book. I think I'm going to get this. This is a good Christmas present for Cheryl.
And it's great history. I'd love you to read it. We could talk about it when I come to California.
At the end of January.
Okay. I will do that with my 5 other books that I'm presently reading.
That book, again, is called The Women Are Up to Something by Benjamin Lipscomb. All right, this is Pastor's Perspective. I'm Brian Perez, and we've got here on the program today Bobby Conway, the 1-minute apologist, Phil Metzger, the chosen apologist, and Brian Broderson, the C.S. Lewis apologist. And let's see how many more questions we can get answered before 5 p.m. Pacific time. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, you've still got a few minutes left to call us on the program. And we're not going to be live again until Wednesday the 28th, so get your question in right now. Here's one from AJ in California. California, about Exodus 34:14, which reads, "For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous," capital J, "is a jealous God." AJ says, "I believe this is the only place in Scripture that refers to the name of God as jealous and with a capital J. Is there any significance to God using this name, jealous, to describe himself?" Also, I've been a longtime listener for over 16 years and loved the program. If it's 3 p.m. on a weekday, I know where to turn in for some solid Bible teaching and the Word. Thank you for all you guys do. And Brian Perez, please never cut your hair again. It is awesome, man. Well, thanks, AJ. So, Exodus 34:14. Jealous. God calls himself jealous with a capital J.
Yes.
Why?
Well, I think Phil Mesker has the answer to that question.
Phil, let's hear it.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Well, I'm more interested in Brian not cutting his hair, but okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an amazing title. I didn't look it up quick enough to know if there's other sections where it's referred to. I'm not sure. If it is, probably not in the same way as this, but it's an amazing title to describe God as that's the passion that God has for his people. He's jealous. He's brooding. He's over you. He's in love with you. He's for you. He doesn't want to share you, and not in some creepy stalker, but in this amazing you're mine and I'm yours, and let's be in relationship together. It's so great to know. And I think when you're in a relationship with God, then you can appreciate this, how great it is to know that God's jealous for me, that it's not just that he's like, well, I'm God of the universe and, it's kind of blasé. Well, I love everybody. I love the whole world. There's something so beautiful about John 3:16, but it's important to bring it back into the specific and to the individualistic of he's a jealous God for you. He loves you. He's for you. He, we talked to Joy earlier today, concern for her daughter living with her boyfriend. And you think God's jealous for her daughter. He's jealous for her. He loves her. He wants relationship with her. He's jealous for that boyfriend. He wants relationship. It's not just about, hey, you shouldn't be sleeping together. That is so technical and not the concern or the heart of God. It's deeper than that. It's relational, not technical. Sin is not a technical error. It's also a relational error, and God cares about these things. So jealousy expresses in human terms this passion that God has for his people.
Bobby Conway?
Yeah, good words, Phil. It could help our listeners to remember when you come across words like jealous, there are negative emotions, right? Like anger, jealousy, hatred. But there's also a positive side to that, right? You can have holy anger or unholy anger, holy jealousy or unholy jealousy, holy hatred or unholy hatred. And if we'll just remember that whenever the Bible uses language where if it refers to God hating something, this is a holy hatred, a holy jealousy, a holy anger. I think that we get thrown off because we think that anger or jealousy is always unholy, but the Bible says, be angry and do not sin. In other words, it is unholy to not have holy anger sometimes. We should be angry about things sometimes, so it becomes unholy to not have a holy anger. It becomes unholy to not have a holy jealousy for your spouse. It becomes unholy to not have a hatred of sin. And so if we can see both sides of the way this works, then that can help us. We also can have an unholy love when we say that love, has no boundaries, for example. Then we slip into an unholy love. We can have a false peace. So the good emotions and the negative emotions turn out to work against us if we don't broaden it to see it in its fuller scope.
Pastor Brian.
No, that was great. I don't really have any. I don't have anything to add.
Anything to add? Well, that's good because the music's
about to start. You want to just speak in tongues as we close out the show, Brian, and I'll interpret.
All right, well, let's do that. I mean, that'd be a good. We haven't done that yet this year. So.
We haven't done that in a while, right?
Only if you can do it in that Darth Vader voice too. That would be
Yes.
Okay, there was something that I wanted to say. Oh, I wanted to just say this. So I was talking to our station manager the other day, and guys, it is amazing how many people we get to spend this hour with around the country. And we usually get our stats are usually mostly just from our station here in Southern California, but we're on a lot of different places. So I just want to say thank you to all of our listeners. It's amazing that people listen faithfully, that they call in faithfully. And I think I can speak for all of us. We're very thankful to have the privilege to be able to, sit behind these microphones and answer the most important questions in the world.
That's right. And they're watching us too on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. God bless you guys. We'll talk to you next time here on Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.